I've been telling my dreams.
This morning in America, departure from the news, Afghanistan, the election news, Michigan, into the criminal law area of interest to me, and this is particularly interest in this area of Washington, Virginia, and I'm delighted we are joined by Kevin Childers. He is owner of the Childers Law Firm in Prince William County, Virginia, and former assistant public defender for the Eastern District of Virginia. Kevin, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Bill. It's my pleasure.
You know a lot of the people here involved. You followed this case, the George Hughley murder trial. For folks all over the country, you know, we have about 3.5 million people listening, and some may not be familiar with the basic facts. Can you give us a very brief synopsis?
Sure, Bill. This is a murder case that occurred in May of 2010 involving a young man named George Hughley V. He was 22 years old at the time of the murder, and he murdered his girlfriend, frankly, Yardley Love, who was 22 at the time. And Mr. Hughley was from a very wealthy family. The University of Virginia is considered one of the most prestigious universities in all of Virginia.
In all of the country, really?
Yes, sir.
Very sought after by people all over the country. A lot of prep school people want to go there.
Exactly, and Mr. Hughley was a member of the lacrosse team, which the University of Virginia is the number one lacrosse team in collegiate across the country. The sad part about this whole murder is that it was fueled by alcohol abuse, binge drinking by both him and his girlfriend. And frankly, Bill, there were a number of incidents that occurred before the murder that really were, I think, indicators that there were some serious problems and there should have been some intervention. They began dating in 2007, and the relationship was rocky from the very beginning. There were many arguments, some previous assaults. Mr. Hughley was in fact arrested for drunk in public in May of 2010, or rather in April of 2010. He was so abusive with the female officer that arrested him that he had to be tasered because he was intoxicated, frankly, and had to be tasered into submission. And frankly, he was just given probation and a suspended sentence.
Soft.
Very soft. There were incidents where he had emailed Miss Love threatening to kill her, saying he should have killed her when he found her with another gentleman, another man. And frankly, the day of the murder, it was May the 2nd, about midnight, he'd been drinking all day. He says he had more than 15 drinks that day. He shows up at her apartment off campus and so upset that she was seeing another member of the lacrosse team. He kicked a hole into the door the size of a basketball, entered the apartment, as I said, right before midnight, and literally beat Miss Love to death.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Right, murder most foul. It's, of course, all over this area, and our area in Northern Virginia and Maryland, and people are shaking their heads and so on. What could have been done? Let me just get to the legal stuff first. The jury found him guilty of
second-degree murder.
Why not first? That's premeditated, right?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons why that didn't happen. He was charged with first-degree murder and second-degree murder. He was also charged with felony murder, robbery, burglary, statutory burglary, and grand larceny. I mean, they threw the book at him, but the facts of the case, I think the jury did the right thing. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that the Commonwealth attorney offered him a plea of second degree before this trial began. And I say that because of the facts of this particular case. And in order to find first-degree murder in Virginia, there's two ways of finding it. The first is you have to establish premeditation. In other words, Mr. Hughley, before he got to her apartment, had already decided he intended to kill her. Now, the problem with that theory for the Commonwealth attorney in this case is that when Mr. Hughley left her apartment, she was still alive. The medical examiner testified that she lived for approximately 2 hours after he left.
I see.
The other way to find second-degree murder is by charging him with a felony such as robbery or the burglary, which they did, being committed at the time that the murder was committed. And that's what they tried to prove, based on the fact that Mr. Hughley took a laptop computer that belonged to her.
Let me ask you something. Let me interrupt you a second.
Sure.
I remember studying criminal law. One of the classic cases I wrote a paper on it was, to look at villains from Shakespeare, for example, Iago or Richard III and so on. Plots will I lay, subtle, false, and treacherous, planned out murders, planned out evil. Is it in our criminal law or in the criminal law of Virginia a qualification of premeditation? That is, an argument against premeditation if a guy is so stinking drunk? People say, well, he probably couldn't have meditated anything.
No, it's not.
Okay.
It's not.
Good to know.
Yeah, because if that were the case, then you'd never be able to find someone guilty who was drinking, and that wouldn't.
Got it. Makes sense to me. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but do you have to show that it wasn't the liquor that made him do it, that there was an intention there apart from the liquor?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I didn't want to interrupt your flow there. So they got second degree.
And grand larceny for the theft of the laptop.
We're talking to Kevin Childers, by the way. If you want to get in on this, we'll hold Kevin over if we can.
Sure.
If you want to call 866-680-6464 if you have a question about this case. So the jury found him guilty of second, and what else? Did they sentence in Virginia?
Grand larceny was also found. The jury did sentence him. He'll have another sentencing hearing in front of the Judge Hogshire, which is April the 16th. The sentence that the jury handed down was 25 years for the second-degree murder, 1 year for the grand larceny. And as I said, Judge Hogshire is going to have another hearing in which both sides will have the opportunity to put on additional evidence, and he will sentence Mr. Hughley on April the 16th. And he can do one of two things, Bill. He can give him the 26 years that the jury sentenced him to, or he can give a lesser sentence. He cannot give a higher sentence, but he can give a lesser sentence, and a pre-sentence report will be prepared by the Division of Probation and Parole in Virginia, and part of that pre-sentence report will be sentencing guidelines. We use sentencing guidelines in Virginia, and they're calculated based on a variety of factors.
Okay.
And I've actually run the figures in this case, if you'd be interested in hearing them.
What do you think you'll get? Bottom line, what do you think you'll get? But tell us how you get there.
Yeah, well, I ran the sentencing guidelines in Virginia based on the fact that he didn't have any. He had prior misdemeanors with the police officer, but no prior felonies. So, if you don't look at what the jury did, if you just look at the guidelines, then the minimum sentence for both of these offenses, that's the actual minimum that Mr. Hughley could be sentenced to, is 14 years and 3 months. The absolute maximum that the judge could sentence him to, based on the guidelines, is 23 years and 9 months. And there's a mid-range of about 19 years. So the judge can do that, or he can give him the 26 years that the jury sentenced him to.
What's your guess?
It's going to be a difficult call for the judge because, there's two different things he's going to be considering. He's going to think to himself, look, if this had been a plea agreement, I'm certain I would be sentencing him within these guidelines. And I may have given him the mid-range of that 19 years, and this jury gave him 26. But the jury is a very powerful voice to a judge. And,
I hope so.
Yeah, the judge is thinking, this is what the Commonwealth of Virginia guidelines say, but what do my fellow citizens, the people that live in my community, say?
Yeah.
They say, we've heard the evidence, 9 days, 60 witnesses. This is what we think the punishment should be in this case. That's a very powerful message.
You get through that prehistory of this guy, too, from everything I know and have heard. It's not good. This is a guy born to money and privilege who has been made a lot, not just the one or two, bad decisions by a good kid, but he's made done a lot of bad stuff.
You're absolutely right, Bill. And I think that's part of the interest that so many people have in this case is that Mr. Hughley had everything.
Yeah.
He had wealth, he had education, one of the finest universities, he went to private schools.
Yep.
His life was set, and he did this.
The moral compass wasn't there, was it?
Absolutely not. He tossed it all away.
We've got calls. I'm going to keep you another segment for not keeping you from clients right now.
No, not at all. I'd be glad to stand on.
What is this? You're very experienced. You've been a public defender. You've seen all sorts of young people, good and bad, and in the middle, as most of us are.
Right.
What does this cry out for? I was frankly just very distressed by, worse than distressed, what I saw at the university. There's all this grieving stuff, and we miss her and all that, and I understand that, and the candle vigil. But I remember as our friend Burling, what's her name? I can't think of the sister of the pilot on 9/11. Deborah Burlingame. Good for you, Claude. Right. Said, "Where's the anger? where's the anger? A, where's the anger? And B, do these institutions, they're aware that all this kind of stuff is going on, this incredible binge stuff. Is there some greater responsibility they're not exercising?
Well, Bill, this happened off campus, but I agree with you. In my opinion, they must have known. There have been incidences that the lacrosse team coach was aware of that I've read about that involving drinking with Mr. Hughley. The sad thing about this, too, Bill, is that Miss Love, she herself had a blood alcohol content of 0.14. Now, in Virginia, 0.08 is legally intoxicated. So both of them had a problem, and no one intervened. But if the university didn't know, I am certain that their friends knew.
Yeah.
The friends didn't do anything about it, and that's the problem here. They didn't say, and he knew he had a problem too, and nobody did anything about it. Now, there is one good thing, if you could say it's a good thing, that's come out of this case, and that is that the law in Virginia pertaining to protective orders has really been dramatically changed as a direct result of this case.
What does that explain what that means?
Before the death of Miss Love, in order to get a protective order, in other words, to keep someone away from you in Virginia, you could only get a protective order against someone who lived in your household or was a member of your family. You could not get a protective order against someone you dated or a neighbor or a coworker. But as a direct result of Miss Love's death, Delegate Robert Bell of Charlottesville, where the University of Virginia is located, introduced legislation that took effect in July of last year, 2011. And under the new law, just about anybody can get a protective order now. You can get a protective order against someone you used to date.
Did she try to get a protective order?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't read that she had or she had not. But
yeah. Well, the question you raise about the friends, this is, Mrs. Bennett, she's writing a book about this. And, of course, the motto of Best Friends is, friends help you make the right decisions, not just there to please you and support you, but to help you make the right decisions.
That's right.
And when asked that question, not to in any way absolve him of any responsibility here. He's the actor, but why didn't people intervene, right? Come in on him and say something. We'll go to break. We have a lot of questions for Kevin. He will generously stay a few more minutes with us, and then top of the hour, promise we'll go to Fred Barnes. We'll talk about Michigan. We'll talk about Arizona. Governor Rick Scott later. Byron York later. We'll be right back. It's Morning in America.
Much time, and how do you keep your feet on the ground when you know you were born to fly?
Monday, so good to me.
Kevin Childers, our go-to lawyer in Virginia. Believe me, I know that. Very helpful to a lot of people I know, and very reliable man, a good and decent man, good family. And Kevin, thank you talking to us about the George Hughley case. We got questions. I'm going to go right to them. And quick questions, folks, quick answers, Kevin, if you can.
Sure.
Thomas in Sausalito, California.
Hi, good morning, Doctor. Counselor,
Yes.
A couple quick questions for you as an officer of the court out here.
Sure.
Do you have the murder and commission of a felony rule out there in Virginia?
We do, and he was charged with felony murder based on the fact that he took based on a robbery charge for taking the laptop computer after the murder. He was charged with that, but the jury found that he was not guilty of that. And I think it was because you'd have to convince the jury that his intent when he entered the apartment was to take that laptop after he killed her, and there was no evidence of that. It was just an afterthought, and I think it was the correct holding.
A lot of people thought that he took it because there was exchanges on that computer, I'll kill you, and, stuff like that, and that he wanted to get rid of that evidence.
That's true, Bill. He said that he took it as what he called...
This is the George Hughley case, folks, that we're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Hughley said he took it as what he called collateral. In other words, he wanted to give her a reason to contact him that next day.
Oh, I see, that she'd call him. Okay,
Right.
Fine. I see. Not fine at all. Bruce in Louisville. Go ahead, Bruce.
Hey, Bill. I was just curious, how old is the young man?
Right now, he's 24 now. He was 22 at the time of the murder.
Right. 22, and so he was of legal drinking age?
He was, yes.
So he wasn't breaking the law until he committed his crime or until he was drunk in public. The reason I'm asking is that Bill and I differ on on policy regarding controlled substances. We have a slightly different take on it. And I'm just curious, Bill, I'd like to hear a consistent argument that's not, that's not in favor of banning alcohol so that we can have a consistent policy, because clearly this legal substance is dangerous.
It totally is, and I don't know any reason that you couldn't have a policy. Maybe Kevin can correct me, that the university could say, as long as you're a student, a citizen, a member of this community, drunkenness is not tolerated. Could a university do that?
Absolutely, Bill. And
whether you're 21, 22, or 23.
Yeah, they could certainly.
Or 18. They
could put sanctions on you for binge drinking or becoming, you can't play on the lacrosse team, for example, if you're drinking too much.
Yeah.
There's some things they could have done, but it's not just the university. It's I think our whole culture kind of almost encourages, drinking by young people. I don't know if you're a listener or you've ever heard of this insidious game called beer pong.
Oh yeah, sure.
Pong. I mean, it's actually a game that is if you Google beer pong.
Oh yeah, it's very popular.
Yeah, I mean it's a game where young adults set up half empty or half full glasses of beer or cups of beer on each end of a table, and toss ping pong balls trying to get them into the cups.
Right.
If you get the ping ball in the cup, then the other team has to gulp down that beer, and you play the game until all 9 beers are consumed. Then you start all over again.
Yeah. Now I've even witnessed numbers of undergraduates playing beer pong, and I can hear somebody saying, and 99% of them do this, and then they fall asleep, and nothing terrible happens.
Well, I've represented not long ago a young woman who was badly injured in an automobile accident
after a
beer pong night. Absolutely.
Yep. When you're there in the real world, you're where the rubber hits the road, right? You get the call in the middle of the night. Right?
Absolutely.
Yep. All right, that's very fair point. No, I'm not saying indifference at all. I think colleges and universities. Rick Santorum was talking about colleges and universities the other day, and how everybody doesn't have to go. This is not part of the liberal indoctrination. This is the part of we don't care. And they say this stuff about, well, when you get here, you're an adult and you can make adult decisions. The heck you are. You're not an adult at 18, are you, Kevin?
No, not at all, or even 20 or 21. But when the culture that you're in promotes this kind of behavior, you go with the flow.
Yeah.
And, as a culture, we have a kind of a decision. Do we want to discourage this type of behavior or encourage it? What do? We encourage it. You Google beer pong, the first 2 listings you're going to see are Target and Walmart selling beer pong tables to teenagers.
All right. John, our liberal line, our liberal friend in Louisville. Hi, John. You're always welcome.
Hi, how you doing? I just wanted to comment that I think you make a mistaken assessment when you said this guy had everything. Obviously, he didn't. If you're only thinking of your pocketbook, which is what conservatives tend to do, maybe he did have everything, but he certainly didn't have everything. I'd be interested to know on what his, parental background was, what his family situation was.
Okay, thanks, John. John makes a very good point. We say I had everything. We were saying everything that money could buy.
Right.
But money can't buy a moral compass.
Or you might say he had every opportunity, and he could have exercised those opportunities.
What about the parents? What do we know?
A wealthy family from Chevy Chase, Maryland. I think they're in the lumber business. I don't know anything about their operation. I know he went to a private high school in Maryland. But I'm sure it's a fine family, and
maybe.
I don't know him, Bill.
I don't know him either. Listen, very helpful, Kevin. Thanks for shedding light and answering questions on this.
Glad to do it. You have a good day, Bill.
And I'm glad for the sake of the young people of Virginia and elsewhere that you're there where you are.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kevin Childers, my best to your family. We'll be back. Politics, anyone? Fred Barnes, Rick Scott coming up, the governor of Florida, Byron York. Calls. Michigan, Arizona. Let's hear from you.
Monday morning.